Hello, welcome to the first edition of Crack with Crackwillow. My name is Cai Howes, author, Redsmith, and lover of music history and the natural world. My guest today is a musician and friend Steve Spon, guitarist with UK Decay, solo artist and creator of Dronescaping UK. Welcome.
Welcome. Hello, Greg.
What was your first awareness of music? When do you first recall ever hearing any or taking note?
Oh my goodness. Well, I remember driving up the A5 Watling Street in the back of my mum and dad's car on the way to visit their parents in Widnes and Merseyside, and there'd be stuff on the radio in the car, and there'd be the home service or something, and there'd be songs like the singing Nun and Little White Bull by Tommy
Yeah.
Steele.
The light service or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Yes, it was
Yeah.
on kind of Saturdays. And being in the car, and they were, the little drummer boy and things like that came on, and hum hum do 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 dum dum. So a little bit later, we had a holiday down in Painston. Luckily for us, back in the probably the early '60s, probably somewhere around 64, 65. And I remember going into a candy bar in Painston, and they had this amazing jukebox machine. I'd never seen one before, but you kind of put a coin in, and then you could play a record. And the record that somebody put on was a track called Telstar, and it was a picture of the rocket taking off to the music of Telstar, and it was like, I swear it was a video, a pop video. And this was going back to 1964, whenever it was that Telstar first came out. So that one record, I loved it for the rest of my life. Then I was hooked
It's a
on that.
great track.
And later on, I learned that it was the late Joe Meek. And in the world I visited later on, he was a godfather of recording studio techniques and stuff. So, which he used on that track to Telstar. He used a lot of innovative track processes that people take for granted in studios these days on that track. And he did it from a good working class lad, rather than being a toff with loads of money and rich parents. He just got old bits of equipment that people were throwing out, and sort of boshed it together to make sounds. And I think that must have inspired me later on anyway. So during the '60s, there was the Beatles, and I suppose the Rolling Stones and the Monkees, and Beach Boys as well. I started becoming aware, and one of the first things I went out and got in 1968, when I had to do a project at school, I went and saw the film 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so blown away with that. It advertised itself as being the ultimate trip, and my God, should a 13-year-old schoolboy be having an ultimate trip? I don't know, but I think it kind of turned my life at that point. I went out and bought the soundtrack, which was classical music and new music, the Strauss and people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Sprach Zarathustra and all the experiment. Yeah, so gradually it developed through the '60s, and then pop music came in on a big way, and I started listening to T-Rex, and I had my favourites: David Bowie, Mott the Hoople, all of that kind of early stuff. That's 1970 to '72. Hawkwind, Silver Machine. I really love that track.
Oh, that's fabulous, and I love the video to that as well. With stars
Yeah,
here in it, just fantastic.
yeah. So my musical thing developed, but then, of course, another thing is. My mum got me a piano and sort of sent me off to piano lessons up the road. So, and my parents got a piano, put it in the front room. It didn't last long because I used to sit on it making a hell of a racket. I just put my fingers on there and stuff. drove my parents mad with it. They regretted buying me piano in the end. So in the end, me Dad said something's got to give, so we carried the piano out the back garden, put it in the shed, and I used to go up in the shed and just let my fingers do the walking. And the way I felt was that my imagination was alive with ideas for songs and symphonies and things like that. I would just
Okay.
play it, probably rubbish, but I thought, I could if I could get out what was in my mind onto a piano or something. So, of course, at piano lessons, I started learning to read music.
Yeah.
Uh, and for a little while, I could read, but slowly I could read simple notation, and I got the gist of what scales were, and some of the dynamics and numberings around it. I didn't really get the Latin time change. I much prefer the American time changes. A whole note, half a note, quarter note, 16th. To me, that's rather than crotchets and crotchets and things like that. It was jargon which I couldn't get to grips with, but I could understand fractions. So
Yeah, crotchets and quavers are about the only thing I can sort of remember really. And when I was taught to play the guitar, which I did really badly, it was just where to hold your fingers for bar chords and how many times you hit it, how many beats, etc. That was
yeah,
about the furthest I ever got really.
yeah. I mean, that's probably true for a lot of people, but uh, and really, I mean, I wasn't on guitar. I started on keyboards, and so with the piano, that lessons. When I was leaving school, there were several things that happened. I went to catering college, but catering college was also an arts college, so there was very arty people there as well, and a hairdressing college. So I became a model for the hairdressers students. Since
Wow.
pre-ed. And of course, Mark Bolan hit the scene. I couldn't really do a Mark Bolan haircut, but then this character, David Bowie, came on the scene, and I just loved his haircut. So the
Yeah.
first thing I did, I said, I want a Ziggy Stardust haircut.
Oh, it's
And then,
Ziggy. Yeah, yeah.
in them days, I had hair, and they kind of bleached it and permed it so it would stick up a little bit, and then they dyed it orange.
Was
And
that
I
the same as the Aladdin Sane haircut?
Uh, no, I don't. I think the Aladdin Sane haircut had evolved a bit. So if you go back and have a look at some of them early Bowie, Ziggy Stardust days, that's the kind of thing I was reaching. But of course, Bowie morphed in between albums, didn't he? He would never
Yeah.
let a style sit. I mean, maybe Aladdin Sane was an evolution of the Ziggy Stardust, but he wanted to
Yeah,
put
I
Ziggy.
seem to remember it quite spiky on top and then longish round the back and sort of gingery.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was kind of orange. They struggled to get the colours because
I
back
bet.
in them days, I'm talking probably 71, 72, 72 actually, 73 even. They didn't have crazy colour.
No.
A bit later on, you could go down Luton Market and choose any colour you wanted for your hair. And at times I did later, but that's a few years later. Anyway, I kind of like Bowie, and another band I really liked that came out in 72, 73 was Roxy Music. I really
Mhm.
loved the flamboyance and the wildness of this, and the fact that there was this guy called Eno in the band, and he had a synthesizer, and wow,
Yeah.
it made it all futuristic, and uh, so yeah, I really cottoned on to that. And then I think the day, or by that time I was working, I was now chefing probably 73, 72, 73. Uh, and my musical taste really started flowering. And this band called Pink Floyd released an album called Dark Side of the Moon. I knew nothing about them, but I looked at the cover in the local record shop, FL Moores. And I thought, wow, that's a really nice cover. I liked it. The fact you could open it and there was all this stuff in there, all these images. And when I
Hmm.
looked at the back, and again, it had synthesizers and stuff. I was becoming very interested in futuristic sounds and things. So I bought it on the strength. I never heard a note of the music before, but I bought it on the strength that they had something called a VCS3, which turns out was a very early synthesizer they used.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, on buying that, I went backwards and bought some of their early stuff. I mean, mum and dad got themselves an 8-track. I don't know if you remember those
Yeah, just about.
cartridge things. So I went and bought all their early albums and 8-track. And of course, I discovered Jimi Hendrix and people like that at the time. And the more I went on and loving music and that, the more my catering career seemed a bit of a an oxymoron, or it just seemed to be at odds with music. Because after all, for somebody who's getting on 17 or 18 now, all my mates were going out and enjoying themselves at the weekends. But with the catering job, I was working the lunch times, probably all morning lunchtime. Took a break at 3 o'clock and then back again at 7. And then worked
Yeah, never appealed to me for that reason, really.
well, I was beginning to realise that was a bit of a mistake, and I couldn't really get a catering job that didn't require me to work in the evenings. So it was getting, I'd got into a band eventually in about 74 or something like that. I love music so much. I bought a keyboard, and in them days it was an old Farfisa organ. So I was looking at the idea of playing in bands. My brother actually beat me to it a little bit because he joined a band. He started playing bass guitar, and he joined a band at school while he was still at school. And I'd missed that, I think. And then he introduced me to these other bands that were playing in school. But the 4 years difference between us was a lot in our school. It was the difference
Yeah, yeah.
between them encouraging you to be in a band and them sort of disencouraging you to be in the band in it's like my dad wasn't really happy when I gave up catering to do a band. He was absolutely devastated by my decision to do that. He said, "Well, get a real bloody job. Get a real job." And a lot of people
Oh,
our age,
yeah, I can remember that one echoing down on my early years as well, and
yeah,
later on, to be honest. Was that around the time you played on the one of the years they moved Stone at the Free Stonehenge Festival to another
yeah.
year?
Well, I can't remember if it was 75 or even 76, but they there was. I was in a band basically. We were by then. I was in a band called Toad the Wet Sprocket, and we were doing cover numbers of Hawkwind and Santana and stuff. But we did some of our own songs, and eventually we went down and recorded a, a single down in a London recording studio. Not a single; it was a demo basically. And so we were ever so proud. By that time, my brother was playing bass in the band. There was myself, and there was the Austin brothers from a local village that were playing bass and drums. Um, we were looking for gigs like most bands. If you get banned and then you want gigs. And then in the news, there was all this stuff about the Stonehenge Free Festival. And I think the Windsor one the year before that. But Stonehenge, at the last minute, it got banned at Stonehenge. But they gave the organisers an old airfield that had just become a vacant at Watchfield, which is funny enough where we rehearsed today, but Watchfield, just outside Swindon, and so they put a number out for any bands interested to play. So I got on the phone and got me old money or whatever it was and went down the phone box because back in the days we didn't have a phone, and I phoned up this number they'd given out. And I said, "I've got a band. Please, can we play?" It's like, yeah, yeah, come along on the Tuesday because the festival was lasting for a week. Who can imagine a festival
Yeah,
lasting for
well, I
a whole?
went to the old Stonehenge ones in about 82, 83, and 84, I think. And by that time, it had gone to a month.
Yeah, bloody hell.
I never lasted a month. The week was about all I could do.
I didn't go down. We went down with a band, for various reasons. we went down in a Morris Minor and an old Beaver van, and there was like a dozen of us, drum kits and everything. There were legs pointing out of windows. We couldn't get everything in. It was a crash. And we got down there and we were gobsmacked. There was this huge, dusty arena with all what you today look at as being Mad Max.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was a stage and there was all, bands playing basically. We made ourselves known. And they said, okay, well, you'll be able to play this afternoon, probably around about 3 o'clock. So he said, the guy pointed us to the back of the stage and said, we'll give you a shout when you're ready to go before you go on. And we did the gig. And I remember playing in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people. We were doing Hawkwind covers and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, Hawkwind were actually there. It was only years later, a few years ago, I realised that I was rubbing shoulders with people like a young John Lydon and a young Joe Strummer, who were both down there in their long hair phases and the
Yeah, yeah.
hippie. Of course, they were already getting plans together for their bands and stuff, But so we kind of did that, and at the same time, somewhere around the same time, I went to see Pink Floyd played at Nebworth, a huge party gig there, one-off gig, and it was just so over the top. Anyway, you didn't. I think it was about 75. Can't remember exactly. Well, that was a defining moment, a watershed moment. This is what you got.
You've gone a bit faint, matey.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry, I've kind of looked away at my notes, but we yes. So we got tickets for this Nebworth festival, and there were all sorts of Monty Python's was doing all the talking in between, and there was Robin Trower, and I can't remember all the other bands. Go Captain Beefheart and people like that. So we went for the day, and we got a lift up there. But they had a certain amount of numbers. I think they were supposed to have about 60,000 people, and there was pandemonium outside. There was thousands of people trying to get in. It was so over the top. It was an absolute spectacle. But
Hmm.
the feeling I got left with at the end of watching that is all very good in that. But for somebody who was in a little band who didn't have the money to buy all that gear or to put all that kind of show on, it was really uninclusive.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
So, when the punks came out a year or two later, the badge, I don't know if you remember it, with a red picture of a dinosaur with a no go sign on it, like,
Well, it totally changed the whole thing, didn't it? Really. I mean, there was a real. Well, I certainly felt a real sort of connection with the bands that were playing, and that we were all sort of part of the same thing. The audience and the bands that were almost as one, really. At least in most of the venues.
yeah, yes, that's right. Well, also on the mainstream, you've got like some of the bigger bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purples, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer's, all trying to outdo each other with spectacle. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's like, well, I'm not going to be able to compete with that. But at the same time, there was a pub rock scene, and that was the alternative. You go and play endlessly on the pub rock circuit, but you'd have to play rhythm and blues and something. I mean,
Yeah.
famously, the Clash came out of a band called the 101ers, and they
Yeah.
were very big on the pub circuit. Uh, so, we'd actually gone down to see a few bands and that kind of time as well. We were in our late teens by then. 77, well, yeah. I mean, 76 came along and we heard about the Bill Grundy and the Sex Pistols thing. The band I was in, they were like poo-poo and turning their nose up a little bit of this new upstart called punk rock.
Yeah.
And so I went down in the early 1977 and I saw uh, the Sex Pistols at the Queensway Hall in Dunstable with the Jam supporting this band called the Jam. There was 80 people there in this vast hall, that Hawkwind played in and packed out a year earlier. And it's like, I felt so sorry for Johnny Lloyd, and I went up to him at the bar afterwards, and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, there's not many people." He goes, "That's all right, mate. It's not your fault." I said, "Well, you just got to keep doing it." And a year later, it would have been a totally different
Oh
story.
God, yeah. So
But
what was he wearing then? Did he have anything sort of? Was he looking pretty flamboyant or raggedy?
well, there's a photo of it somewhere online. So I can't really remember. It didn't really strike. I'd seen pictures of him. He wasn't wearing the seditionary Nazi T-shirt or anything like that, as far as I remember. But he was just wearing probably what we would take to be normal now. But at the time, it was different. He wasn't wearing like flares or
No,
looms
well,
or anything.
that was a big thing, wasn't it? That was a
Yeah,
jump in itself because everybody up until about 76 was still wearing flares and
yeah,
sort of Starsky and Hutch hairdos
yeah. In fact,
or worse.
if I remember rightly, I might be wrong here. I might be some other point. I think he was wearing some sort of shirt and a waistcoat and sort of baggy straight trousers. I mean,
Yeah,
when they finished playing, he didn't go off and wait for the encore. He sat down on the stage on the drum riser with his head in his elbows, just looking at the audience, just staring into the
yeah.
air.
No one stared better than Johnny,
No,
or does stare better than Johnny, actually.
but here it was. He was the harbinger, the knife that pierced open the veil of extravagance that were the old-fashioned dinosaur rock, which all of a sudden it all looks a bit dinosaur-y. I never listened to Pink Floyd. I totally lost touch with the Pink Floyds and stuff
Yeah,
after. Um, but I discovered them a few years later, probably in the early '90s again. You keep an open mind on things. So
yeah. Well, I was just starting to get into sort of the likes of Hawkwind and Black Sabbath when sort of punk came along because it was out of the sort of awful doldrums of bad soul disco and sort of novelty records, and glam had disappeared, hadn't it? And so it was definitely there was definitely a void that needed filling,
yeah,
and I think most of the bands then filled it quite well, really.
yeah. I mean, on a local thing, I mean, the Queensway Hall, I guess, was about in the next town along Dunstable. Um, they also had another venue which was very famous called the California Ballroom, and during the '60s and '70s, most known bands were played at that venue, including the Rolling Stones and the Four Tops, the Supremes, all soul bands that came out in Britain on tour went there. People used to
Hmm.
bus in from all over country to it. But I saw the Stranglers there when the Stranglers played good, and it was uh, broke probably in '77 actually, and they played there, and all the usual crowd that used to go along to the soul shows, and we're now going to the punk shows, and the Stranglers played, and then towards the end of their set. There was a massive stage invasion, and you just couldn't see the band anymore. Somehow or other, they were keeping going, playing, but most of the audience that were down in the front were now on the stage, and it was like
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
an
I can
amazing.
remember nights like that myself.
And then right next to where I lived, a little pub venue called the Royal Hotel, and the local what we developed into the local arts group called 33. But at the time, they were in an organisation called Reflex. They they put on a band called The Damned, and it
Yeah,
turned out this was probably early '77. There was a Damned's 10th gig, and they played there, and they put chairs and tables around for everybody to politely sit around and watch. So,
yeah.
first thing Dave Baniam did was jump on the front table and spit theatrical blood at everybody sitting on it. It was just
Fabulous.
total chaos. And at the end of the gig, they ran on a rampage through town, and with the idea of breaking into a chemist because all the off licenses shut. They wanted some. something to do. So they kind of luckily never got arrested. But yeah, so that went down in legendary Luton.
Luton legends.
Yeah. Oh yes, punk had a big grounding in Luton actually, in the local area I was in.
Yeah, I think it was the same in Friars around the Aylesbury area, and it's sort of spread out, and High Wycombe.
Yeah, the home counties really, wasn't it? Because
Yeah,
we'd
I
go
don't
to
think
it.
it took long for it to sort of like escape out of London into the home counties, and then it sort of trickled a bit further north and west from there, really, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yes.
So, UK Decay, when did your sort of involvement, because you were pretty nearly in there right from the very start, weren't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, in 1978, I moved out of uh, the place I was in. I had to move home basically, and there were all these old Coronation Street terraced houses in an area of Luton, around the back of Wellington Street, and my friend was moving out of a house in Wellington Street, but there was a compulsory purchase order. It was going to be knocked down, but probably not for a year or two. Anyway, cut a long story short, I moved in, and to my pleasant surprise, there was a basement. So me and my mate, the Captain Blewett, we uh, we uh, basically we constructed a plan to turn this rehearsal the basement into a rehearsal room. So we went out and got loads of plasterboard and nails and what have you, cleaned it all out, put a false wall in, and we sealed up. We had a small but tight, small rehearsal room where we could make a racket. We still had neighbours living on one side next door, but you know what? They didn't mind. For some reason, we'd have a band down there, and it's not just ourselves. When me and Captain Blewett formed a band, and that became the early Snow White and the Sick Punks. Later, to change their name to New Mania, which is the band I was in initially. By the beginning of '79, I was in that band, and because we got the rehearsal room and we couldn't rehearse every day, we met this other likely-looking bunch of young punks in town that were desperately looking for somewhere to rehearse. And I said, "Well, come along to ours." So we got to know these guys, and of course that was Steve Earle, Martin Smith, and Stephen Abbott. Before that, it was Paul Wilson, but he left, and Abbo took on the mantle of singing and playing guitar in the band. And meanwhile, I was in New Mania. And if you
Was
get
that
up,
was that was that band called UK Decay? Was it, or did it have another?
yes, it was initially called the Resistors.
Okay,
And the plan we formed when, because the rehearsal room was the catalyst, we met them there in New Mania. Bearing in mind I was in the, and before New Mania, it was Snow White and Sick Punks. So we decided, as the Resistors and Snow White and Sick Punks, to pool our resources and to make Luton's first punk rock record. Uh, and the plan was that we'd take a side of a 12-inch, not a 12-inch, a 7-inch, an old-fashioned single each,
yeah,
and we do 2 tracks each on it, on each side, and we call it the split single, which is how the first single came to be. So I sold my keyboard at the time, um, and with the money from selling the keyboard, that was my share of putting towards getting the first 1,000 copies of this record done. And of course, there were me and myself and Mick and New Mania and Steve and Abbo and the other band put the money in. And between us all, we got the money for the first 1,000 pressings. So it came to pass. And, at the same time, we were like putting out combined records together. We said, well, why don't we go out and do gigs together? And at the time, I was actually doing a day job delivering um, washing machines and all kinds of things around the home counties. I called in at what was a shop in Northampton during my lunch break, and it was called Acme Clothes and Records or something like that. And it was a shop that was selling punk clothes and merchandise plus vinyls, and the window was full of posters for gigs in the Northampton area. And there were always the bands called the Zeros and another band called Bauhaus 1919, and there's various other. It seemed like a happening scene, so I called in there in my lunch break. I said, "How do I go about getting a gig?" You see, because in Luton I manage. I'm in a band, and we go out as a pair of bands. There's two of us. Would there be a chance that we could do a swapsy gig with some of your bands playing in Luton? Because Abbo at the time was on the committee to the tech college, so he had a bit of sway on what entertainment they put on in the tech college. And I was out on a limb a little bit. I said, I tell you what, the idea just spontaneously came to them. And I said, what about doing a swap gig? You get two of your bands, and we'll you put us on up here. And the guy was really into the idea of it. So before we knew it, we were playing at the Racecourse Pavilion in Northampton, and we were booking two of their bands to play with us in the Tech College in Luton. So the bands they wanted to put up were the Zeros and Bauhaus. They dropped the 1919 by that time. So we actually did a gig in Luton with us headlining, with Bauhaus supporting and the Zeros supporting. And we went up to Northampton and we did a gig supporting the Zeros. And I
Was
can't
it? Did
remember.
you always have a decent banter with Bauhaus? Did you have much to do with them before and after?
Well, with Bauhaus, we it was our link into Northampton because before we knew it, we had a gentleman up in, who was halfway in between in Milton Keynes, in one of the little villages around Milton Keynes, and he was known as Chris the Farmer. And he was a farmer by nature, but he was into punk rock as well. So, but he knew some of the people around the Northampton scene. So there was a guy in Newport Pagnell called Paul. I can't remember his name now, but Paul O'Reilly. Yes, that's it. And there were people in Northampton. There was a Graham Bentley in Northampton. There were all the people running the Acme clothes shop and stuff. Anyway, word got to us that Bauhaus were doing a gig in Wollaston, a little village in the middle of Northamptonshire, just a small market town. In fact, Wollaston is famous for being the headquarters of Doc Martens shoes. So
Yeah,
Northampton a shoes town.
yeah, that was convenient then.
Yeah, but the pub in the middle of the village is the venue where Bauhaus played. We all piled up there, a big crew of us from Luton one day, and it's a long, narrow venue upstairs. Uh, and Bauhaus were playing that night. That was our real first introduction to them, and it was all dark. And there was this guy called Graham Bentley doing the lights for him, and he was really good on the lights. He shut all the. It was night time, winter, I think it was. It must have been because it was dark. So he shut all the lights down. They had minimal lights, and they were just flashing strobes and projections and stuff. And then the band came on, and they were doing like God in an Alcove or something like that. And Pete Murphy picked a mic stand and just threw it right down into the audience, mic stand, and it caught my mate Chris the Farmer on his forehead. And God, you didn't want to mess with Chris. He's used to wrestling pigs and stuff. He
Okay.
he was absolutely furious, and we thought he was going to go over and beat the shit out of Pete Murphy. And we go, no, 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 no. And there was sort of this whole scene for a minute while we're trying to calm him down, and then the manager came over and he said, "Look, I'm really, really sorry about that. We talked it all over. We took Chris out. Things calmed down. In a way, though, it was a bit of an icebreaker because we got to know the band and the
Yeah,
manager.
yeah.
And from that point on, the manager of their band said, "Well, look, we at the time were trying to get a John Peel session as well. I'll point that out. We'd already got the first split single, and I think we were talking about the next one by that point in time. So as it happened, in the meantime, about autumn 1979, got asked by Abbo to join. He was struggling playing guitar in by then they changed the name to UK Decay, and my band New Mania was all over the place. Nigel Dark, the drummer, had wandered off and he was uncontactable. Gaynor had had another bit of a breakdown. Steve the Voice was trying to hold things together, but nothing was going anywhere. So I just said yes straight away. I jumped at it, joined with UK Decay, and within a month we'd got the basis of the Black 45 EP all ready
Yeah.
to go and record. That was the autumn of '79. Um, so yeah, that was the backdrop, and
That was a great EP.
yeah,
Still
and
got the copy.
it was then we started pestering John Peel for a session. You know, we'd heard how good. I used to listen to John Peel every night and record it on a cassette, and then when I was driving around in my day job, I would listen to his previous evening. You know, I'll be driving through Corby and the Fall will be singing out Industrial Estate, yeah, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
things like that. And it was John Cabaret Voltaire and Purdy Boo and MX80 sound and
It
all
was
the
a very exciting time, you know.
yeah,
2 minutes past 10, wasn't it? Or every weekday night there was that same. I think it might have been a bass line or something, and then
yeah,
I don't even know whether he introduced the show or just put a record on straight away. I can remember it as if it was yesterday, just switching on, and I think "Holidays in the Sun" by the Sex Pistols just started playing,
yeah,
and he was one of the few, if the only DJ that never talked over the beginning or the end of a record, which was very refreshing in those days, especially if you were like a lot of kids at the time, just waiting to press the play and record on your tape recorder.
yeah, which was me.
Yeah, which was just about anybody really, wasn't
Yeah,
it, back
no,
then, you know? I mean, there were some people that wasn't into music whatsoever, I suppose, but there was a great army of us who all did the same and just,
yeah,
but you could guarantee on him not actually sort of like burbling over the end.
yeah. I mean, he played our Werewolf single several times, and he played it from the very first grunt to the very last howl.
Oh, yeah, which is quite you know, I wouldn't have thought too many DJs would have done that actually.
I mean, oh God, that's another story in itself. Why that got to be on the?
Certainly not an easy listening. It wouldn't have been on made its way onto the light program anyway, I don't reckon. Not unless it sort of like was a start or the end of a Hammer horror film or something, or an introduction, something like that, you know.
Well, there you go. But the thing about the Nag's Head in Wollaston was that it turned out we didn't know before this. We'd often heard Peely say, "Oh, I was speaking to my friend Big Bob at the Nag's Head the other day." Never put two and two together. But while we were all making up after this microphone incident at the venue, Graham Bentley said, "No, this is where John Peel does his secret gigs." And in fact, he knew the manager there, and every month or so, he would take an evening off and visit this pub and do a DJ set and watch a band that he might or might not do a session with at some point.
Hmm.
It was somewhere casual for him to do it without him having to go across into London and stuff like this. So all of a sudden, we knew what our next agenda was. It was to get a gig there with John Peel watching and playing us.
Yeah,
So that actually came to pass for the following year, in probably early 1980. We actually got to play there, and John Peel was DJing in between the sets. And it's like, wow.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
he said, after we played, he goes, yes, I really, really like the music. He said, but I'll have to have a word with my producer. I can't just give you the go ahead. I have to have a, was it John Walters or
I was
somebody
just
like
going to say John Walters. I'm pretty sure it was.
that? Yeah. And
Wasn't he
so,
called the Pig or something?
no, that was his wife, I think.
Oh right, there was one of them. He called. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
afraid bring back memories now. Okay,
yeah.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think it was his wife.
Oh, nice.
Long,
Yeah.
but the Big Bob there. He called him Big Bob. So anyway, a week or two later, I was at home one day and I got this phone call. It was John Waters, and he goes, "Oh yes, you've spoken to John. Yeah, we'd be happy."
You're fading a little.
We spoke to John. We'd be happy for you to come along to Maida Vale, and he gave us some dates, and we got our stuff together to play there. So within about a month, the following month, off we were down to Maida Vale and this huge recording studio. And it's like, wow, it's all set up for us. You get a day and you've got to record everything you're going to do. So there's loads of people looking after you and running around with microphones and setting you up and that. And then you just play live and they record it. And you go and get a meal, like
Yeah.
ridiculous prices. It's like, wow, a luxury meal. So, and then you get paid for it at the end of the day. It's like, wow, isn't this wonderful?
Yeah.
We'd struggled. I mean, back in the punk days, everything you had to pay for, and money was not the first priority. Although you needed money to do things. We ran a fanzine. It was our way of spreading our word. Every time we did a local gig, we'd release a copy of a fanzine and give the news for other gigs coming up in the future and some reviews from previous gigs, and
What was
mainly
the fanzine called?
it was called the Sus, because at the time the Sus laws, which
Yeah,
were
yeah.
laws by the police to stop and search anybody at will, were very much in focus in the national media.
Yeah.
So we'd get a book. Sorry.
No, it just reminded me of the Ruts single, or the Ruts track anyway. We've got you in sus, I think it was called, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Well, we'd go out and buy the copy of the Sun newspaper the day it was printed, and we'd like cut the top out, and we'd got our little SS sound, and in them days we had to do everything by stencils and by newspaper cutouts with scissors and glue. That's how we did it,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah,
handwriting, neat handwriting, well, as neat as possible. But so we'd take an SS sign and we'd put it over the N on the Sun and call it the Sus.
yeah.
So, but it had the date that it was released on. That was the important thing
Oh,
about
are
that.
there any of those still in circulation at all? Do you have anybody, or do you know anybody who's still got any of those?
Well, people have said to me they've still got copies. On the UK Decay heritage website, there's some skeletal copies, but I think there's one copy in full. But look, we last released the first few, our first few gigs, first 5 or 6, and then Better Badges in London liked the fanzine, and they by that time they were doing fanzine and distributed them to all the independent record shops around the country. They said, well, we'd be very interested in taking your fanzine and printing 2,000 copies of it and sending it all around the country. So they did that with the last couple of editions that we did. So out there somewhere, probably somebody's got some copies of that. I've got a couple of copies in my kind of archive. And I digitised a couple to go on the UK Decay website at some point, which I think is still there. But often you see them on eBay come up and things like that if you look long enough. So, but the band got too busy and we couldn't carry on the way we were. So, especially when the Dead Kennedys tour came up in later 1980, was it? Yes, it was 1980, autumn 1980. We got the offer from to support the Dead Kennedys. Well, by that time we were on signed up to Fresh. By then we'd had logistical problems with our own label, Plastic Records, and so they licensed the Black 45 EP off of us and said we want another 3 singles or something, I can't remember, and an album off you. They said all right, we kind of did the deal. So by then they were trying to promote our music. 1980, we were often back to European Germany, Berlin. We were
Because you had quite a big follow up, but in the home counties and around London at that time, anyway, didn't you?
Yeah, it's building. I mean, it helped us going out. I mean, it was very important for us to go out and meet people. You know, there were social events, and we felt we were gathering and building a community of people. And
Yeah.
by, by the time we played some of these places, we were seeing regular faces turning up to the gigs. You know, there'd often be fanzine writers and things like that. And we'd always try and help the small fanzines and that. In fact, at one point in time, we ran the National Fanzine Co-op from our house in Wellington Street for a few months.
Hmm.
But trying to run a fanzine and a band at the same time that were beginning to take off, it's all getting very, very difficult to hold all the cards. And besides that, we were running a shop as well by then.
Yeah.
So we took on too much really to concentrate on getting any. So we concentrated on getting the band right for in between 1980 and 81. But then we had the issue then after we did the Dead Kennedys tour at the end of 1980. Martin, the bass player, was struggling with his job. He was getting more and more trouble. He was an apprenticed architect, and he was going out with his lady. And he had to face a decision in his life, like band or job. And he thought about it for a while. It's hard for him, but he had to choose job in the end. So at the beginning of 1981, he'd left the band. And unfortunately, we had a tour of Europe right on the threshold, and we had all sorts of things. We'd got Steve Keaton booked to come along and on part of the tour and do a big write up for sounds and stuff. And what could we do? We had about 7 or 8 days before we left for this tour, gigs already booked. Uh, but luckily, a girl bass player called Lorraine stepped in. She was in a band called the Candy Stripe and the Statics in Luton.
Hmm.
Sadly, she passed away a couple of years ago. But she stepped in on bass, and she's a very, very good musician. She soon picked up all the songs, and off she was with us. And if you look online, there's the Berlin versions of Unexpected Guests we did at that time, where
Okay.
ABBA wears that mask, Dr. Five's mask.
Oh, I can remember the mask from
Yeah. When
The
we were,
Aylesbury gigs.
we were, we, we played with a band called the Trashers and the music, not the Music Machine, but the Music Hall in Berlin. It's called the Music Hall, and the Trashers were very friendly with the owners, and so they said, "No, come over. You can have the afternoon practicing." You know, because Lowell had only had a couple of practices with us, so we took them up on that. And of course, well, while me, Noel, and Steve were sorting out all the technical music things, Abbo and the guys out the Thrashers and some of the other guys hanging on went out. It was somebody's birthday. They went to a fancy dress party and got all these masks and things and came back and were all dressed up in these masks. They ceremonially carried Abbo above their shoulders and dumped him on stage while we were doing a very trippy version of Unexpected Guest.
Okay.
And that you can find online. That's actually filmed Berlin. Uh, Unexpected Guest at the Music House. But that was the introduction of the mask, and that was as much a surprise to us as it was to anyone else.
I still remember it really, really clearly. So it worked.
Yeah, I mean, years later, I went to an exhibition at the National Library of Britain in Chris, was it the new library? Anyway, they were running an exhibition at the beginnings of Goth. So we went down to see it. And of course, the next minute I'm looking up at a picture of the Sounds article. Is this a start of punk gothic? And there's Abbo wearing the mask. He wore the mask for all the subsequent gigs because Steve Keaton came over and saw him wearing the mask. And we were, by that time, he was talking about Abbo used to have a knack of coming up with names. I'm called Spon because Abbo named me Spon because I was spontaneous. Uh, You'd have another thing if JCB for Joint City Boulevard, and people were smoking or doing naughty things like that.
He's
So,
certainly got a creative imagination, that man.
so he was going, oh, bloody Gothy types. It was coming out about Gothy types all the time in that tour. So I think Keaton picked up on it. And anyway,
Yeah, I seem to remember. I mean, I might be wrong. That wasn't it something like an interviewer asked Spon, not yourself, it might have been yourself, I don't know, or Abbo, and said something like, what if you're going to see UK Decay, what can you describe it as? And I heard that it was just him or you or somebody saying it's like a gothic experience. And
oh,
then
yeah.
within sort of 2 weeks, all of the journalists and bands in the sort of country had suddenly got a label as goths. Is there any shred of reality in that tale?
I think what I've described, it probably wasn't me. I mean, it was Gothic. I mean, there was no
Yeah,
doubt
it
about
was. I mean, certainly your first album was the epitome, I think, of gothic music, and harking back to the old gothic novels of
it.
the 19th century and stuff. It captured that vibe brilliantly, I thought, and
Well, we were all into reading horror stories and things, like Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft. And I used to buy them. The books you get for Penguin or somebody. There was a famous series of books that came out, horror stories, and
the Pan Book of Horror.
yes, something like that. Yes,
Yeah, they released loads of them. They were great. Yeah.
yeah. But at the end of the Dead Kennedys tour, by that time, the sound engineer Grizz uh, was getting to. We allowed him a little bit of license to experiment a little bit with us, and he used a Roland Space Echo on our music. And it was fine in the smaller venues, but when we played Warwick University, the hall there was absolutely humongously massive. And very famously, we got I remember playing the harmonic on my guitar and hearing it bloom out and reflect back on this vast cavernous hall. And
Hmm.
it's like, wow, wow, just wow, wow. And I just loved that. So from that point on, we were battling the elements and
Yeah.
unexpected just kind of took off in that way. And I mean, as I was saying with Abbo, always joked about gothic types, especially with from that point onwards in Berlin. Um, so it was a buzzword that you used quite a lot of the time. So I don't think the word goth actually really got used to express our music and the time we were going. It's something that, as far as I remember, came up after we'd finished. What did come up, and I remember talking to Richard Cabot about this, who went on to write for the New Musical Express, but he was a local lad, and he was a big fan of ours at the early days. And we knew by 1982 that something was going down. We'd recorded from Edmund only. It was late. It should have been out 6 months earlier than it was. But without
You're fading a little bit again, fella.
Oh, sorry. What I'm saying is that by 1982, we realised that there was a new kind of style of music going on. There was a whole new generation of bands. We were getting them to support us. We were now in a position where we could offer support bands. We were playing
Yeah.
venues like the Zigzag Club in London and the Lyceum Ballroom and bigger venues, the
Yeah.
Hammersmith, Clarendon. So we had a bit of license to choose our bands, and we'd put bands like Play Dead and like Southern Death Cult, like Sisters of Mercy, Ritual, and all these bands were up and coming. Sex Gang Children, another one. They were called Panic Button earlier than that. We had a
Hmm.
demo from them, and Abbo would joke about them being, oh, the gothy types again. It's one of his favourite buzzwords.
Yeah. Because it was a fine line, I think. I mean, I think goth certainly, although you could argue even sort of like Black Sabbath was sort of
Oh yeah, yeah,
goth.
yeah.
You could argue at a few of these, but I mean, at that time, I think it's largely sort of sprang out of sort of punk, and I can definitely remember an interviewer asking again one of UK Decay something in the line of do you consider yourself a punk band? And I think the main line was one of the band, I'm not sure, might have been Twiggy or someone said, well, if I don't see any punks in the audience, I'm not going to play. Which I thought was great because at that, you know, around that time it was starting to get a little bit less fashionable, and I thought that, you know, although it was still very big everywhere else, perhaps its core or its shock value in London had depleted a little bit. But I thought it was great that someone was actually had a sort of shred of authenticity about them still, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it was we were aware of all the other kinds. You know, Oi music was coming on strong, and we kind of didn't really like the Gary Bushell
No.
take on Oi music because it was deflecting music into being well, kind of extreme and taking a and it was also 1 2 3 4 that kind of punk music. But and I don't want to go back there again. Really, do we? Uh, There was on the other hand, there was all the not the glam, the what do you
New
call it?
romantic starting
New
to come
romance.
off.
Yes, there was. I mean, I had a soft spot for some of the new Human League, some of the early Human League
Yeah,
music.
definitely.
Uh, Circus of Death, for instance. I love that tracks. Um, but
I
uh,
always felt it sort of lacked. I always felt it lacked a little bit of. I mean, the Blitz kids looked great, and I thought found that sort of like really intriguing. And I always sort of thought that the possibilities were endless for people wandering around as sort of like people from history and sort of, you know, in everyday life, and coming out with something musically really different, but
yeah,
it never seemed to sort of manifest, lived up to its potential, shall I say? You know what I mean?
yeah.
It seemed to be more of like a regurgitated mid 70s Bowie mixed with a bit of Roxy music, um, on a bit of a shoestring, which was very punkish, but sort of, you know, Fade to Grey was brilliant, I thought, and like you say, the early Human League was fantastic, but then it seemed to sort of, in my opinion at least, sort of then degenerate into some sort of gooey popish,
Oh yeah, it did. Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. The
mainstream.
I mean, for a little while, it was the record companies were on the back foot when punk came along. They were now following, not leading. You know,
Yes.
so for a while, but gradually they made inroads and they started making inroads back into it. So the pressures came back for bands to release pop singles, and
Mm.
it was
So
easier.
what sort of like brought about the decay of UK Decay in their first instance then?
Well, we'd been a long time without a bass player. It seemed a long time, but it was about 7 months. We'd lost Martin. Lorraine didn't want to stay in the band. She just stood in while we were doing the tour. Then we had another tour with the United States. And while we were over there, there was this young guy who was 16 at the time. But he actually knew all our songs from listening to the records.
Mm.
So we took a leap of faith and got on that airplane to go there, not knowing whether he'd really be any good or not, but we were assured he would. And do you know what? He came up, he, he fitted the bill, he could play all our songs fine. And so while we did the American tour, uh, he went up and down. We brought him back and he did played some of the bass on some of the From Admin stuff. Because he had to go back home, he was technically a minor, so he was under
Okay.
the. We couldn't have him very long, so off he went back, and we were out. But bass player. By now, the record company was getting really mad at us to get this bloody record finished, and we were back to square one without bass. Then Ed came along to a rehearsal, and in that afternoon rehearsal, we we jammed and we wrote three of the songs that came out from Madman Only, and realised that here's the man we'd been waiting for all along. And very quickly, he was in the band, and we went back in the studio. at that point in time, it was just over a year. We had about 15, 16 months before we finished, unbeknown to us at the time. But that last year, from the album came out late. It was scheduled. I mean, Fresh wanted to do a Theatre of Hate with Our Price, and what had happened with Theatre of Hate, their first album had come out, and Our Price had put a big spread out in all shop windows in London and where they got shops, and it really worked. It lifted Theatre of Hate above the parapet. And that's what Alan Houser wanted to do with us through Fresh Records. They wanted to do the same kind of big spread.
Yeah.
But the problem was we were late. And then when the artwork and we finally got finished, the day the artwork turned up, it was a shock. If you've ever looked at the vinyl version of For Madman Only, there's a picture on the inner sleeve. It's a famous picture of a Nazi, German Second World War Nazi shooting a woman holding a child with a
Yeah.
rifle. And as much as the shock aspect of it, everybody balked. The record company balked and said then that Our Price are never going to put this up in the shop window.
No.
Basically, the band we were looking at, it's not really saying what we want to say here. This is just for shock value. So it was decided that. I'm sorry, I'm backtracking here, but I was going to get to it. It was decided that the cover needs to be changed. So I had to go back with. I've forgotten what his name is now, but it turned out Bernard Chandler from. He was the bass player in Poison Girls, but he lived in East Anglia. So I
Hmm.
literally had to get in the car and drive straight to his and say, we need to get something else together really fast. So together that afternoon, we poured through pictures and books and things, art books that he'd got. Then we found this integration of faith by an artist called Jean Tarok. And it was like, that's more like it. Let's have that. And that was what the cover of For Madman Only was. Took him another week or so to get it together. Uh, but of course, that was 3 weeks late then. We were
Yeah.
bumping into Christmas. Our Price by then said, forget it. We got a Christmas display now.
Yeah.
And so that happened. Press were really disappointed by that. The next thing is they're going bust. Well, the following year they're going bust, and they blamed us for the one of the reasons for it.
Okay.
But it wasn't really. We were doing our best. Under the circumstances, we did our best. We did actually get the album together, and at the end of the day,
Oh, it's a bloody brilliant album.
yeah,
It's a fabulous album. Really
well,
innovative album.
yeah. I mean, it was. As I say, it was some of the songs were brand new from the input of Ed, and the others Ed just sort of played the other parts really, really well. And that's when we realised we had something new going on. And the subsequent gigs after that, every gig we did got better and better and better. We got tighter and tighter. More and more people turned up
Hmm.
until we were doing selling out the Zigzag Club gigs and things like that. And we were doing big gigs all over Britain and then Europe. We did endless tours in 1982, at least 3 tours. The last one in the autumn, we'd played St Albans Civic Hall. We played Friars by then. We weren't always headliners. Sometimes we were supporting Killing Joke and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I
But
can remember that.
we were doing really big gigs. Most of them by then were really big. And then we were going all around Europe. We did one tour where we toured all around Belgium and Holland and in a van. We went to Germany.
You're fading.
We toured right through Germany to Berlin. We came back. We drove right across Europe. Got a ferry at the Hook. Got off at Dover or wherever it was. Oh no, the Hook and Hollow Harwich it would have been.
Yeah,
Yes.
Harry. Yeah, yeah.
And we drove all the way up to Luton, picked a few things up, then carried on the road and drove all the way up to Glasgow. Did a gig there, and then at the end of the gig, we drove all the way back to Luton. And then the following few days we were doing a gig in Haverfordwest, which seemed like at the end of the middle of nowhere, but it was a well attended gig. It was a fantastic
Yeah,
gig, actually. They
yeah.
really appreciated us. Another gig we did was West Brunton Pavilion, which was another gig at the other end of the British universe. And
Was
we were
that
just,
on the same tour where you all ended up by being ill due to, you reckon, so much gob flying around?
oh, no, it's not the same tour, but we did get ill. Heading 9 of us in a transit van, inevitably somebody catches a cold and then we're all down with it. And that happened regularly.
Yeah.
But being young, in our early 20s, we were probably able to handle it at that age. God knows now. I wouldn't want to do it again, but I'd love to do the gigs, but I wouldn't want to do it that way.
No.
But the fact is, we were getting tired. We did. I can't remember. We just seemed to be gigging nearly every other day in 1982. By November of that year, we'd done a first gig in Paris. At the end of a European tour, we headed back to Britain. We were all done in. We were really tired, and yet there was pressure on us to do yet another album. So when we did get a few days off, we were in the rehearsal room trying to write new songs and that. But it was then, really, we should have had a break for 3 months and then
Yeah.
got back together again. But being young and impetuous, Abbo had fresh ideas. He'd moved to London by then. He was mixing with people like, oh, I don't know, Andy from Sex Gang and Kirk Brandon and what's the Duff? One of the Duff. Oh, I can't remember his name, but he was in the guitarist. He was meeting all these other London musicians by then and going to the. So he was seeing another world, another universe, another set of potentials. And so he just said, right, UK Decay's old, let's split it up and form a new band. No, the only thing splitting up was chucking me out, really. Chucking me out and getting another guitarist. So I think that's what they wanted to do. I mean, times did get strained, and being in a band in a touring
I
situation,
can imagine it gets very, very claustrophobic.
it gets claustro. You're on top of each other. It's like holding a marriage together, but with 8 blokes or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can remember getting out and nearly having a fight with one of the roadies that we had at one of the gigs on the way back from one of the gigs. I was like, oh, this is silly. This is all getting really silly now. We should have had a break for a few
Yeah,
months and
yeah.
then got back together. We were burnt out basically. So
So what sort of brought you all again together? I think, was it in about 2013 to release your much long awaited second album?
well, a long story really. People in the early 2000s kept saying to me, somebody lent me a book called The Gothic Book by Mick Mercer, and oh, really? Really? So you're really famous, you know that? I said, no, not really. That was years ago. He said, but you made a big impact on the world. And so uh, I was speaking to a guy who was putting on websites, and he was doing like underground dance and rave music websites, but he also liked punk music.
Hmm.
And he said, you were in a punk band, weren't you? I said, oh, yeah, I was in a band. He said, what was the name of the UK Decay? I said, I've heard of them somewhere, but recently. I said, well, joking, this was about 2004. I said,
Yeah.
recently? And then before I know it, I'm getting a phone call from somebody. Oh, we managed to track you down. It's from somebody from Rough Trade, and they wanted to put For My Country out on a compilation album. And I got back to I said, oh, we're going to be putting a record out on this. And he said, look, you need a website, don't you? He said, I can give you a website and get you set up with a gallery and a forum. If you're interested, I can help you do it. So I took him up on it. The next thing is that through the rest of 2004, we got the UK DK Communities website together, and all of a sudden, all these people, this is pre-Face Fastbook.
Yeah, yeah.
MySpace was about.
Yeah.
MySpace, we put up a link on MySpace every time somebody added a friend, and with a link back to the website. Before we knew it, we had like a couple of thousand people on the website that joined the forums, and there were people chatting about the old days and stuff. And it was like, wow. And people saying, when are you guys going to get back together
Yeah.
again? And it's like, oh, well, hang on. Well, but sadly, Steve Hahn had passed away in the 90s, and a trip to India that he unfortunately got ill, and he got on a train to try and make it to get home, but things got the better of him and he never made it back. And
Hmm.
it's one of those really sad stories, but because by that time, although we kind of had a bit of a row at the end of '82 when we split up, we were friends again by then,
Yeah.
water under the bridge sort of thing. And when he come back from India, we were going to get back together and work on some music between us then, back in 1995.
Wow. Didn't know that. Yeah.
We'd actually done a recording with the whole band before he'd gone to India. We recorded For My Country, and we recorded Barbarians.
Yeah. Great track.
So, yeah, I mean, that was us getting back together. And the idea is when Steve got back that we would probably look at reforming then. That would have been a reformation in the 90s. But anyway, leaping forward, by 2005, the UK Decay Communities website was doing really well. It's doing well locally in our hometown. It was reuniting people back together again. We were getting people who moved out of town and gone all around the world. Um, there was talk about reunions, and initially I put on. I decided to go ahead and book a pub and book some of the bands. But some of the fans had bands, and so I said, right, okay, let's put on a reunion, and we put on a slideshow and get back, just have a drink together and stuff. So we did that. We did a couple like that, 2005, 2006. Then 2007, I started working at the Hat Factory, the art centre in Luton. And by then they'd heard that I was running this website, and that they were really interested in it because they were all about Luton culture, music, and legacy in Luton. And so they were kind of proud that we were a Luton. And that I was actually working as a technician in the art centre, and
Hmm.
it seemed good to me that we could move our reunions over to the art centre. So, in which case, when I decided to do that, I got a phone call from ABBA on one of them, and he said, "How about if we get up and do one or two songs?" I said, "You're joking?" He said, "I don't know who's going to play drums." Well, I'm sure we could work it out. And it was then that Ray came up to me and said, "Well, I can play drums, I've got Steve Hall's old kit and I know his sound." And he taught me how to play. Uh, and I looked at him and I thought, well, if there's anyone anywhere that's going to have the zeitgeist or the soul of Steve, it would be Ray. So all of a sudden, the bits fell back into place. And
Hmm.
the only problem is I haven't played guitar but at that point, it was something like 26 years or
Yeah,
something.
which is quite a long gap, isn't it?
The guitar was under the bed. I was already making albums with Ella Joe at the time, uh, and she didn't even know that I had the guitar sitting. And then I pulled out one. She was absolutely flabbergasted. "What are you doing with that?" And I'm playing it again. She said, "You're joking."
That's
Anyway,
confidence for you. Yeah.
so yeah, as it came to pass, it, we got up there and we played For My Country twice on that
Hmm.
reunion. And that was it. And that was a big historical moment. That was 2007. And then the following year, after that gig, ABBA said, "Let's do it properly next year." So that we did. We did it properly. We did a proper reunion. We got, um, I'd got Rubella Ballet played and a few other bands. And by that time, I was working with people at what was the university, and they had a sub club thing. So we decided to move it all over to the sub club because the venue where the Hat Factory where I was working was going to be too small. It only had a capacity of 120. So, and I'd sold easy sub. The sub club was about 400, so it was, and there was another bar that you could put bands on as well. So I decided to do a really big thing of it. We had Rebecca Ballet and Click Click and a couple of other bands, and here it was, the proper reunion, and we played through the set.
And what year was this again?
2008 by now.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we got a gig under our belts, a proper full length gig under our belts, and even though we were beset with a few technical hassles, and mainly down to me not realising how important wearing glasses was, and not
Yeah.
wanting to wear glasses on stage, but I couldn't see anything, couldn't see my pedals. So people going, Spon, 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 in the audience. I'm fumbling away like an idiot, trying to get without my glasses. Somebody get me glasses. Anyway, we got it together, but people really.
So you were out of denial by that time.
Yeah. So the following year, people were phoning us from all over Europe and places. We played the Drop Dead Festival in Portugal, and we got invited to play the Wave Gothic Treffen Festival in Leipzig in Germany, and an Italian tour. We did it all in 2019. Re-released the full album only on CD, which hadn't happened. And we got back together properly. And then we were getting back on top of our music, and it was then that we decided that we'd work towards a new album. So over the course of the next 18 months or so, we started writing a whole new bunch of songs, doing more gigs as well. Uh, so I think we pretty much recorded it. I can't remember if it was 2011. I think we started writing it in 2011.
And just for the listeners, taking it for granted there is any, what's the name of that album called?
It's called New. Well, it turned out to be called New Hope for the Dead. New
Nice.
Hope for the Dead. Yeah. Obviously, when we were working on it, we didn't know it at the time, but it was just Project A or something like that. But that's what the title developed into. So I think that came out in 2013, did it, or
I
2000?
think it was 2013. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we started recording it early 2012. We started writing it through the second half of 2011. And sadly,
It's a
on the day
fabulous album.
oh, thank you. Uh, on the day we were about to embark, because ABBA had got this deal with Dark Lord. We called him the Dark Lord, but it was Chris Sangarides. Who was known as a bit of a heavy metal producer, to be frank, and he's famous for his Black Sabbath and Judas Priest type of mixes that he did. But he was more than that. He did do other kinds of music. Did a lot. Did a lot of reggae and stuff as well. But, we called him the Dark Lord, and he was a personality unto himself. So we headed down to Deal to record it. Well, obviously, Deal's a long way from Luton. It means crossing London and driving. In fact, from the recording studio room where we were mixing it, you could look out the window and see France on a clear day. It was
Yeah.
to then, yeah, closer to Calais than it was to London. Yeah. So, but I did a lot of the guitar work at home as it goes in the end, and sent the bits in there. I mean, we did record live versions while we were at the studio, but I just all the overdubs I ended up doing at home.
Was ABBA in sole control, if you like, of the lyrics, or was there a sort of interaction with the band, or how did that go?
No, the way the lyrics work with DK, Abbo is the lyricist. He has to sing them at the end of the day, so he has to transcribe the words. I mean, in other bands I've been in, we've done lyrics by committee, which is,
Yeah.
had mixed results, but it just works. We trust Abbo to come up with good lyrics.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's fair enough.
And they're all lyrics that reflect the views of most of us in the band in one way or another. So he's very good at getting our kind of zeitgeist when it comes down to words. And I must admit, when 9/11 happened, I went back and listened to the actual track for Madman Only, and it's like I listened to it and thought, wow, this is a horrible prophecy. This is the victim screams as the American dream, and
Yeah,
struggling for breath in a vacuum.
you're faded out, matey.
Oh, sorry. It's a bit, I have to talk. I've literally got my face in the laptop here.
Yeah, I can see it poking out of my phone.
I think the phone
No,
is right.
no
Anyway,
crazy colour needed. Yeah, yeah.
okay.
But yeah, so no, it's a mighty fine album. It's a terrific album actually, and there is a possibility of another one day.
Well, I mean, recently we've been rehearsing for these forthcoming gigs, one of which is this Saturday. Um, we've got the Milton Keynes Bowl, and we're up at the Gothic Festival up in Whitby in October, the Halloween festival. So, but we were all together, well, at the end of last month for rehearsals, and Abo said, I've got another album's worth of lyrics. So, what does people feel about it? I said, well, I'm up for it. If you want to, it's a matter of finding funding to do it. The last one,
Yeah,
we crowdfunded the last album, but we still had to find an amount of our own money at the end of it.
yeah, yeah,
And what it meant was all the subsequent gigs we had to pay back kind of loan that we had to loan money. I suggested that let's see if somebody else like Rough Trade or somebody might finance it. We think that Rough Trade are going to put out a new vinyl release for Madman Only because
okay,
that's been out of print for a long time, and
yeah,
as is the CD version of For Madman Only, and uh, the CD version of For Madman Only has actually got Rising from the Dread on it as well, so
yeah,
it's more just the. But if we do it, I think we'll have to try and get financial support doing it, whether that be crowdfunding or what. It'll probably be a project that starts later this year or next year if it happens. Uh, I think at the moment we're just going to have to see how we get on with these gigs.
yeah. See how you get on with each other again. But I have no doubt Abbo can come up with some decent lyrics, and I'm sure the band collectively can produce some drop dead brilliant music to go alongside.
Yeah, yes, we've got plenty of ideas left to. There's plenty more where that come from.
I reckon so. Yeah, I reckon so. It's interesting to see how it's all evolved anyway, and it's still evolving.
Yeah, uh, this will be the sixth decade we played through.
So at least you're not as old. None of you are as old as Charlie Harper, who is now 81, I think, a couple of days ago. And by the way, the year is 2025 for all of those who may be listening to this in the future.
Well, I had to have maximum respect for Charlie Harper. I remember him being around back in the early 80s when we were around. He, to us at the time, he seemed really ancient.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
But, now I've got absolutely top respect for the man. He's out there still doing it.
He's still doing it. I mean,
And
I
it's,
met somebody in about 1990, and they were in a band with him in 1970. I think reading somewhere he did his first live band, or was in his first band in about 1963 or something.
oh, my goodness.
So unless he's a vampire, and but to still
Yeah,
be going through that lifestyle, sort of, probably. I mean, I can't see them having a flash coach or anything like that. To still sort of like be chuntering around in a van or I don't know.
yeah,
For 81, is take your hat off to him, really.
Yeah, and somebody else like that, but on a different kind of field of music, is Arthur Brown.
Yeah,
Uh, he's still out there, and he's still got the bloody voice he had as well. It's amazing.
yeah, which doesn't always happen, does it?
No, no, no. We sadly went to a mate of mine's funeral in last year. Was it last year? Yeah, it was. He was still around, but he wanted a funeral while he was still. He had terminal cancer, sadly.
Mm.
But his biological dad was Arthur Brown, and he never found him because he was adopted
Okay.
about 20 years before. So, and then he actually became his dad's tour manager for a while. But he knew he was going to go, so he put on a big party. Sod having a bloody funeral and a wake for me afterwards.
Hmm.
Let's have it now.
Have it now.
Have a live funeral. So we turned up. It was brilliant. You met a lot of the old lads and stuff. Um, but of course, his dad did an impromptu set there. We all stood up with him singing, and it's just him and a guitarist and his voice, and it was just absolutely beautiful what he did at the time. So yeah, I mean, there's hope for us all. We could be looking at another reunion in 10 years' time,
Yeah,
hopefully.
oh, yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, you've got your own solo projects and that on the go. Are any of those sort of like nearing the end of the pipeline?
Well, funny enough, I've got the Mabinogia Volume 2 now. I've just been formatting that, and I'm getting it ready to put up. And I'm going to release that in September, but it's going to be a pre-release available soon, and it's called Mabinogia 2: Dreams of Other Worlds. And
Okay.
what uh, obviously, I've got a small little drone, and I've been living in this beautiful land of West Wales, magical, steeped in
Yeah, well, it's
history.
been an honour to share the same turf with you occasionally on that project too. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, what sparked your interest in recording these Iron Age fortresses and settlements with your drone?
well, I've always been interested in history, and I'm not interested in kings and queens and the lists of traditional history as taught in schools, but where I grew up, there was this place that fascinated me called Ravensburg Castle, and the town itself had another castle called Summary's Castle, and neither of which are traditional castles. Summary's Castle was like a fortified manor house, but Ravensburg Castle wasn't a castle; it was an Iron Age hill fort. And one of my teachers at school was Bedfordshire top archaeologist. He was a teacher in his spare time or whatever, or an archaeologist in his spare time. But he also was famous. He wrote a lot of the textbooks for early Iron Age hill forts, and I think he must have inspired me. But the thing is, he taught me at school, um, and then later on, what happened was my dad went back to school to learn teachers training at the college, which wasn't far from where I lived. But funnily enough, by this time, this teacher called James Dyer moved to the college to teach the teachers. And his pet project, and he had it coming up, was going to do a dig. And then somebody else on this dig was Francis Pryor, young Francis
Yeah,
Pryor.
yep.
Uh, and he was going to dig the gateway to excavate Ravensburg Castle. And I remember my dad being involved. He'd asked my dad, he got everybody that he knew involved in helping, basically. So my dad took me up a couple of days, and uh, I saw this terrific big dig thing, and they dug up these banks and ditches, and it was huge. And it's like, what was this? And he was digging away the gateway, and he actually described to me, he said there would have been a big wooden palisade and a gatehouse there. From that moment on, I was fascinated in these Iron Age hill forts.
Yeah,
Um,
Francis Pryor was a brilliant sort of instigator and inspirer, wasn't he? I've
oh,
got
he
his
was,
book on the Bronze Age, and I think it was him who released, did all the work on another book called Seahenge, was it? I think it was
yeah,
Seahenge.
I got that book sitting there as well. So yeah, when I moved to Wales, one of the things that struck me about the beautiful landscape, as well as the folklore here, was the big tall hedgerows. But then you actually see anything. I thought, I've always wanted to. I'd go on country walks and imagine being able to send something up into the sky to get the view all around. I wish I could be up there, 200 foot up and see the view from here. Uh, and of course, that the answer to that solution to that issue was a drone. And of course, DJI and other companies are bringing these little mini drones out now. So I'd got a drone when I was living back in Bedfordshire. I took it off one day in the fields outside, flew it off, and it just went whoosh. And I couldn't
Yeah.
control the bloody thing, and it crash landed in the field and bust up. That was the one and only flight of that drone. But these new, I thought, well, how am I going to stop that happening again? So I looked into it and did my research. And I ended up buying a mini drone, Mini 2, I think it was, DJI Mini 2. And I was looking on the map, how many hill forts are there in the area I live at? There was Pendennis and Aberystwyth. And, then we'd been over to Preseli's and I'd seen the Boyle Dragan and the hill forts around Pendennis locked in and Castlebach. Uh, all of which I started taking my drone out and I'd fly it from beyond the hedgerow to see what was above it. And then, of course, something on the size of an Iron Age hill fort, you need a drone to actually capture the fort.
You do, yeah, quite right.
And, I'd get back home and look at the footage and it'd just be, wow, look at that. Wow, look at
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And it was just gobsmacking. Look, people built that thing 2,500 years ago. Look at it. How did they dig into that hard rock and, with antler picks or whatever? And so I just started getting more and more, collecting more and more footage of Iron Age hill forts. So I'd get the Ordnance Survey maps, and one other good resource was the Atlas of British hill forts. Great site.
hmm
Uh, sort of carried in here and got, well, Wales have got something like 800 hill forts or something like that.
huge amount. Yeah.
And so I just started going out and filming them basically. But somebody else inspirational who was local was Dr. Toby Driver. And I found out very quickly that he was a local guy that was, recording and logging, and the aerial archaeologist for Wales, basically. So he'd go out on a little Cessna flight and film aerial things. And he's been doing it for 20 odd years. So he's probably the foremost expert on West Wales hill forts there is. Um, So I went out and bought his book. I read all up about that, and it's just like, right, well, this is going to be it. And when I got the footage back, I'd look at it and say, what can I do with it? My software allowed me to put the footage up and to compose music to it. So it just seemed to all click into space, and it became obvious that I need to go and film a hill fort and compose music to it, or
Yeah.
not only hill forts, but coastal scenery and other
Well, it's
landscape.
pretty inspiring on foot, let alone from in the air, and you do
Yes,
get a whole. It makes you wonder whether they sort of had, certainly with the man-made structures and the hill forts, and that if they were ever sort of contemplated the view from above rather than just sort of practical and possibly for agriculture or maybe even religious uh, sensibilities, if you like. But it does make you wonder if ever they did consider what it was like from above.
well, yeah, yes, it does. And I would almost certainly say that in some cases they must have thought about it. But the bird's eye view, to them, it would have been impossible that humans could fly. But maybe they thought the spirits could. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, perhaps the sort of sky god or whatever was.
messages to the sky. But even so, I also very soon discovered that the weather, the light was very important as well. So I mean, one of the
There's
things
a lot
about
of fine tuning, I imagine, for it. I can get that, having known other people who've had them for very short
yeah,
periods of time and did like you did on your first one, smashed them to bits on their very first. I'm not sure I'd have the patience for it myself, but you seem to put it together pretty sort of seamlessly. So fair play to you on that one.
yeah, it was.
How many more have you got to do?
Well,
Or is that a ridiculous question?
well, I've got, funny enough, I was counting the other day. There's lots of little ones, ploughed out ones, especially in South Ceredigion. There's a cluster of them around Cardigan, um, but they're not really. There's some that are just not really much of a point filming them. They're either in deep forest and under tree cover, and you can't really see them,
No.
or they're totally ploughed out.
Yeah,
Uh, And there's more that are covered in trees and forests that are all ploughed out than there are that are visible,
I can
unfortunately.
imagine. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
But
landscape doesn't stand still, does it? Really,
no, no, it doesn't. The plough has been not a very good friend to these ancient ruins, unfortunately. As is probably there were a lot more standing stones and things
Oh,
before.
I think there was a terrific amount more
Yeah,
standing stones. I mean, most
yeah,
of them have been reappropriated as gateposts or
exactly.
parts
Yeah,
of walls,
or,
or just
or just
unfortunately, perhaps even to sort of pathways and roads, probably
yeah, or even
trackways, farm tracks.
or barns. Break a stone up and make. I mean, you drive stone walls and God, Pembrokeshire's full of that. You often walk along Pembrokeshire and think that stone there and that wall. It
Yeah.
must have been there for years, but
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
it
look at
looks
the Brasellis. I mean, it could be an absolute sort of, I don't know, an empire of stone,
yeah, yeah.
individual stones, or potential circles, or forts, or whatever, or cromlechs. It's it's vast, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I get the impression that there used to be a Stone Age megacity that's been completely trashed by giants who picked the stones up and thrown them around at will.
Well, we've gone on to Merlin again, haven't we? But yeah, certainly so. I mean, it just is. I mean, it still is to me a complete mystery as to why there was quite so much history in stone history in general,
Yeah.
settlement and whatever in the sort of Preselles compared to other areas of Wales. I know there was, quite loads of settlements elsewhere, but the Preselles really has got something different about it, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I feel compelled and drawn to the Preselles, and I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, me
Particularly
too. Yeah,
the northern slopes of it, as it goes down to the sea towards Newport and Trifmauer. Uh, and of course, you've got Castell, which is Britain's only rebuilt hill fort,
yeah.
complete with Iron Age roundhouses on it. I mean, they've got more work to do, but it is work in progress. And it's really interesting to see how something like that might exist in the landscape.
So, do you think that there's anything going back to those ancient days that we could actually that we've lost that we could use nowadays? That's a leading question for you, isn't it?
Oh, it's a very leading question. There's a sense that people were more in touch with the landscape back in those distant times. Most of us now, and I'm not talking about everybody, because there are those amongst us who can sense and a sense of the location or the genus loci.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who live in urban cities and high-rise blocks. And one of the reasons I started doing this was because during the lockdown, people were stuck in their rooms. I wanted to give a sense of showing the big wide outdoors. And of course, you get gravitated to the Preselles. Um, yeah, I mean, people are staring into their screens, their phones, they're missing the sounds of the birds.
Yeah, I've always thought that the umbilical cord, has been sort of. Oh, that's a really bad bad example actually. But you know, even for the last sort of 40 years, I sort of felt that sort of like people have got a lot of people, not by no means all, got a real detachment from anything or their surroundings, be it sort of trees or fields or past history or yeah, anything that's just that's a surrounding area, but we're in our little sort of houses or our offices or our factories, and everything has got sort of more and more screen based since then, really, and it's sort of taken us away from the main source of things, or perhaps the importance of very sort of primal heart based things, perhaps.
Yeah, we were we weren't built to look into screens or compute, live in tiny boxes and mass. We were built to survive in the landscape.
Yeah, and have an intimacy with it. Really, I
Yes,
think that's that. You know, at least there was a sort of intimacy with it. Whereas now, I mean, it's getting considerably less. You know, all the time. I mean, most of us of our age. I'm using the term lightly, mind.
yeah,
Had at least probably grandparents or great grandparents, certainly great great grandparents, who nearly on all lines were actually engaged in the land. And
yes,
to come down to now, we've just gone down to, I'd hate to think what little percentage actually people actually work in or with the land now. I think it's minute.
yes.
Um, and that's happened all of a sudden, really, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, how long does it take a human to adapt to this new environment? Well, luckily, very quickly, but there's several layers to that question, and you might have to adapt quick to survive, but the inertia of your DNA and upbringing and your ancestors means that, as you say, we have very quickly had to readapt to a new kind of way of living.
Yeah, and I
Vaccines,
think there's a severance there as well. You know, I think that even though people are not aware of it, I think that there is a certain sort of severance. I mean, there is almost like what in the Welsh language could be classed as a herife towards it, even though most
yes,
people perhaps couldn't actually put it down to a term or something, but there is a nagging thing there in some people's minds, if not all, really. But I think maybe not all, maybe not all. No, no, no. But in a good deal of people's minds, I think there is a sort of nagging that they should be more of an involvement and more of an intimacy with their immediate location and their ancestors and
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, people are out of touch with where their food comes from. I mean, for instance, a couple of 100 years ago, you would have, the last little village we lived in, everybody in the village would have been called out to gather in the harvest.
yeah.
Um, at certain times of the year, or to do various things in the land around them, because you couldn't go down to your local Morrison's or Tesco's, or they didn't exist. There was, village shops, but you'd have to somebody be supplying milk and cream to them. You really had to think about your food and in your community where you were growing, and now that's been taken away. And the industrialisation and the move towards urbanisation, and now towards what kind of new what we're going to do with AI. It's going to
Oh well, goodness knows where that's going to take us. I mean, I
yeah,
think that
it
might
really,
make the internet look like small fry, to be honest. You know, that's we could go on forever on that one about the potential
good.
for good and ill with that one.
Yeah, but it just
Before
shows.
we switch off, is there anything which you would like to promote or at all?
Oh
Any
yes,
gigs or anything?
you asked me earlier on if I've got any projects coming out. I mentioned the Mabinogi and
Yep,
Dreams
yep,
of the
yep.
World. That that's going to be a CD album. Well, it'll be an album that's coming out on the digital formats. But also there will be a film which I'll put on YouTube. It is the soundtrack to this film,
Okay.
Mabinogia, Dreams of Other Worlds, Volume 2. A couple of years ago, I released Volume 1. That project's coming out. It's finished as far as I'm concerned. I've got to do all the marketing and everything like that for it. But another project I've been working on was the fella from Tralee in Ireland, and he's an experimental electronic musician. And together, I've reached out across the Irish Sea to him, and we're working on another project this time. This project's called Welsh Hill Forts Galore. And,
Yeah.
my vision for it was an hour of Welsh hill forts, with each hill fort taking up, on average, a minute. Some a little bit more than a minute, some a little bit less, but depending on the footage. But and this chap over in Ireland is working on 50% of the music. I sent him the music. The idea of the brief was compose to the music, compose your music to the footage. Sorry. So, and I've done the same thing. So basically, we got an hour of film of hill forts, and we've both composed music to it. And this is going to be more of a musician-led project than an archaeology one.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And there will be an album of the finished music available, and it's going to promote. What we're really keen to do is it's not just going to be a film of hill forts with wishy-washy catalogue music put over the top of it. This is bona fide performances that we both put in over the top of music, so over the top of the footage of hill forts. So there's an ongoing project. I mean, we've got
Nice
most
one.
music together, but it'll probably be some time with the UK Decay I've got going. I'm going to have to put it on a back burner for a little while until July. So I expect this project to come out by the end of the year, hopefully, because I've got a fair amount of editing to do on it. But the music's there.
Great.
So basically, I've got 2 albums coming out, and a third project I want to do, besides possible UK Decay stuff, is I'm going to work on a project here with 2 local musicians to where I'm living. Speaking to a bass player last night who lives up the road, and what I decided is that we're going to make a 4-track EP. That's the target. So we're going to write 4 tracks, and this is going to be guitar-based
Okay.
post-punk music. So we, yeah, and probably with Ella Joe singing and some of the tracks as well, but maybe another singer as well. But it's going to be along the post-punky.
It sounds like you've got, like myself, quite a few irons in the fire, and EJ's got a great voice, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you see, since living here and since I no longer have to do a daily job to keep myself above water, I'm so lucky. Yeah, but I am retired now, so I'm on a state pension.
Oh,
I
bless.
yeah,
It's
I
stunning
know,
nowadays to actually live long enough to get one in the first place, isn't it?
I
Really?
know, I know. I feel sorry.
And
Mind you, I had to pay for my last year or two myself. So yeah, but I am at that point now. So yeah, I mean, I
and
am.
just one thing, is it? Am I right in saying it's Dronescaping UK where a lot of your Hillfort bits and
No,
pieces
it's
will be
just
done?
Dronescape in Britain.
Sorry,
Yes,
Dronescaping Britain. Okay,
yeah.
matey. I'm glad you got that one in. Yeah.
Yes, you can find me on the YouTube channel called at Dronescaping
Yeah,
Britain.
you've got quite a collection going of that. How many can you remember how many you've done now?
110 or something like that. I'm getting on towards
Okay.
110.
Okay. So it's definitely a watch this space.
Yes, okay.
Okay, matey. We
It's
better
been,
go and have some food now. But it's been a pleasure.
it's been great chatting to you, Greg.
Nice
Great
one,
chatting.
matey. You look after yourself.
And yourself.
Take
Good
care,
stuff.
Spon. Cheers,
All right.
fella. Bye
And
bye.
you. Bye-bye. Bye.